Hi, this is Jonathan, and welcome to Ethics TV. This is the first episode of something that I've been probably thinking about for a while, but haven't really had a trigger action point to want to start. I've recorded lots of things in the past. I've done talks online and on stages around the world and written books. But truthfully, the events of the Bitcoin conference, July 25th to 27th, 2024, were the final push that I needed to get this started. Um, Ethics is something that people sometimes misuse in its terminology. And what I mean by this is the moral principles that govern a person's or an organization's behavior or the conducting of any activity that they do. And so Ethics TV is an investigation into the, the principles that are guiding behavior and decision making. And it's also to encourage critical thinking about the things that are around us, not to jump to conclusions and just have answers to things, but to investigate more why things are potentially in play. And at the Bitcoin conference, the talks by Donald Trump and Edward Snowden are the combination, I guess, a contrast that really inspired me to kick this off. And what I found interesting was that you have all of a sudden in a rebellious environment of blockchain, uh, an enormous concentration of politics from nowhere. The last 10, 15 years in the blockchain space has essentially been an uphill battle to show the value of distributed ledger technology and decentralized systems. And from the 90s, when these conversations started, and I was lucky enough to be part of various different conversations around these topics, the purpose was to remove the trusted middle parties and enable a free value and information exchange between you and someone else or more than one party, but not to have a set of trust in the intermediary. In fact, to have a trustless system. And now we have a very different situation at the time of recording on July the 28th, 2024, on the back of the Bitcoin conference, with the presidential candidate Donald Trump running for a second term, and Edward Snowden, the whistleblower who's been in exile since 2013, former contractor to the NSA. Now, regardless of what you think about either of those two people, and they do polarize opinions somewhat, the messages that were said by Donald Trump was very seemingly pro-crypto, and the messages from Edward Snowden were somewhat cautionary. Some of the gems from Snowden were such a statement such as, you know, we don't want to be a land of the free and home of the slave. Politicians have first they fight you and then they love you. He also said that the system is broken, the internet is broken. There are corporations who are attacking individuals and individuals attacking each other, and there's more combat than collaboration. And these parties, these systems in play are not necessarily us, they're not our personality. They, you may want to vote, but don't join a cult. The challenges that these bring in terms of our questioning of what's going on, especially around when you have political candidates speaking to audiences who are lapping up statements such as we're going to make sure that this is the land of the future of crypto, and if Bitcoin is going to the moon, then we want to be part of that. It's obviously met with applause, and it's met with enthusiasm, no doubt. Commentators are speaking about it all over the place. And then when Snowden spoke, Unfortunately, on one of the main videos of his keynote, the audio track is muted. But I think that actually adds power to the talk to some extent, because there's a lot of mic drop moments and truth bombs here. There are questions that it brings, not least the fact that it would appear that he's kind of been pointing out that politicians will say whatever it takes to gain control, and in fact, organizations and banks and corporations are very much tuned for dominion. At the end of the day, and he mentioned a 1776 book called Wealth of Nations, around how that control sometimes can come, or sometimes always happen. And currency is an extremely good weapon of control with civilizations. The flow and exchange of value is something that, if you can manipulate, then you can guide behavior quite effectively. There's a book called The Dictator's Handbook, the subtitle being Why Bad Behavior is Almost Always Good Politics, which claims that the role of running for office is to gain control and power. And when you're in it, the role is to maintain that control and power. And so one could argue that politicians will say and do whatever they want, provided that it gets them more votes. And that may sound like a cynical viewpoint, but if one were to entertain that and look at organizations who in this day and age are acting in a way that what Snowden would call immoral and inhumane, and he would also tout potentially as criminal. He said that the GDPR hasn't regime, as he calls it, or regulations, didn't work due to the lack of penalties for abusers of our data. But it begs the questions then for us as critical thinkers, and perhaps that's what brought you to this channel, is why would politicians want to gain control of the crypto community? And also, why would the structure of an ETF, an exchange traded fund, be put in play? Sure, to enable investors to gain exposure to digital assets. But is there a way then of controlling cryptocurrencies more severely in that way? And bearing in mind the purpose of decentralized technologies was to remove the very same requirement of those third parties who are now in positions of control over that and are weaponizing and politicizing these tools. Would it not seem strange that then flow into ETFs in terms of money doesn't necessarily reflect on the price? And does that lead us to a question of, are we being fed the right information about prices from exchanges? And in the theme of why would the governments and organizations seek control, one could argue, what would happen if the control of technology like Bitcoin ended up with a high single or double figure percentage of the circulating supply? How much price manipulation, if that were to be an outcome, is okay with you? And if we play the tape forward, how much would centralized control eliminate the purpose of decentralized technology? Now, I'm hoping that that's the type of thing that we're thinking about when we see politicians speaking about blockchain, and also when people like Edward Snowden give a counter view. These are the questions that we could be asking ourselves, and we could be asking the leaders of our countries. And then to Edward Snowden's final point, what are we going to do about it? What actions are we taking? And I don't personally feel that this is necessarily a call to arms in in a revolutionary capacity that is almost anarchistic. But are we okay with the systems that we have running like they do? Do we have a crossroads in humanity now where we can choose between blindly going down a pathway where our information is monetized behind our backs, despite paradoxically our opt-in through terms and conditions that we don't read? Is that the future that we want? Or are there alternatives to that future? My ambition with Ethics TV is to continually raise these questions and perhaps ask other people for their questions that we can also ask and perhaps answer, and then also seek to build alternatives to this. And I don't think that now, at the time of recording on the 28th of July 2024, what was formerly ideology is out of place. I think that now the time has become apparent to be important enough to raise these questions, because the conversation is now in the light of day. The nanosecond that a presidential candidate shares a stage with a former NSA whistleblower, on one hand, the candidate speaking to a crowd who love the statements of belief in this technology, despite the fact that this technology was absolutely and utterly not for these purposes. I think now's the time for us to talk about these things more and for it to be raised more. We look at Bitcoin as something that price go up, number go up, when moon, but we forget the purpose of the technology behind it. And we look at Edward Snowden and think, well, he would say these things because he's known to be a rebellious whistleblower. But there is some truth in all things. And it may be the case that a certain politician does genuinely believe that there is a value in these technologies. But then why would that be the case? Would they be caring primarily about the population and our freedom? Or would they be thinking about dominion? What is the objective behind these statements? And perhaps the truth bombs that Edward Snowden dropped in the conference are partially or fully true to an extent of tremendous concern. And without wanting to create a hysterical or reactionary stance full of hyperbolic statements, I think instead now's the time for us to actually think carefully about our choices and to look very deeply at our options, away from the populist standpoints that essentially are clickbait dressed up in different ways. Anyway, welcome to Ethics TV. Thank you to the Bitcoin conference for being the trigger for me to actually act and start broadcasting. I have no idea which way Ethics TV will go and how long it will last and in which format, but I'm broadcasting here to you today to welcome you and to start questions maybe in your head and to seek answers. My concern in general is certainty. I'm concerned when people are certain of one thing or another, because as soon as we become certain, we stop asking questions. And if we stop asking questions, we stop learning. So welcome to uncertainty. Welcome to questioning. Welcome to Ethics TV.